Do you enjoy war crimes? Do you enjoy exploiting the environment? Do you enjoy accelerating climate change? Then boy do I have a game for you. Welcome to Satisfactory, a game where the fable of the Geneva Convention and undiagnosed neurodivergency amalgam into a game that tickles my brain just right. You play as John Engineer after being dispatched from Earth by the tech billionaire cabal known as Pepe, Planetary Extraction and Profit Enterprises, to expand the mandate of DEI among the stars. Drill, baby, drill. And you have the entire arsenal of a slightly more advanced Iraqi oil company to make it happen. After the Euro-American micro-implosion of 2064, Earth has seen better days. And the tech billionaire overlords are the tens of thousands of micro-dystopian cities that look like if someone looked at Cyberpunk and was like, yeah, I want that right now.
In Night City, you can become...
Decided that having just one polluted planet wasn't enough for their collection. Nothing says capitalism quite like Walmart's and, tax evasion. That's when you come in. The engineer family has a long and distinguished history, dating all the way back to medieval engineers, to Farming Simulator, and now to this mysterious planet. Your great-grandfather built castles that collapsed on peasants. Your grandfather harvested corn with such efficiency that the ecosystem never recovered. And your father designed the Tesco meal deal.
I've just started this calypso. It is fucking minging.
Environmental destruction is practically coded into your DNA at this point. After all, when you run out of space on Earth to make sweatshops, expanding to the stars is the next logical conclusion. And making giant grey blocks of machines producing off-brand Nintendo merch is a step essential to the salvation of the human race. When you set down on this new alien planet, some people may see a beautiful landscape filled with unique and varied plant life. But personally, I see profit. Profit as far as the eye can see. And today, I'm going to make green into more green. Forget carbon capture, I'm going for alien landscape capture, baby. The Fix-It Corporation wasn't exactly subtle with your mission briefing either. Extract resources, expand factory, don't ask questions about those weird alien artifacts. It's like they copied their business model directly from an oil company's How to Exploit Developing Nations handbook, and just replaced developing nations with uninhabited alien planets. At least they're consistent. And let's be honest, we've all seen enough sci-fi to know how this story ends. Spoiler alert, not well for the planet. But hey, at least we'll have enough reinforced iron plates to build a monument to our hubris before the inevitable alien uprising or environmental collapse. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Now, obviously, if you haven't picked up on it yet, I'm taking the piss. This isn't the actual lore, and I'm a bit hesitant to make this video considering the current climate around, speaking facts. But I want to play Satisfactory, and the only way I can do that and not feel bad is to turn it into a video. So here we are. And if you don't like this video, I really don't care. Actually, let me know down below because because I am a masochist, yes. To be fair, it's not like the Coffee Stain Studios developers are trying to hide their environmental commentary either. They literally named the game Satisfactory, which is what oil executives probably mutter when they see quarterly profits going up while the ice caps melt. It's about as subtle as naming a game about factory farming, just a few dead cows, no big deal. Points for honesty, I guess. Let's face it, I don't play Satisfactory because I care about sustainable development. I play it because it produces the same feelings as doing crack cocaine behind a bush in the park, and watching numbers go up activates the same part of my lizard brain that gets excited about Instagram likes and cryptocurrency gains. Before you know it, you've sunk 500 hours into the game, your room looks like Asmongold's bedroom, your partner has left divorce papers downstairs, and I can't see outside without wondering about the efficiency rating of the local supermarket. But, there's something deeply satisfying about laying down perfectly aligned conveyor belts and watching resources flow through your factory, like blood through capitalism's hardened arteries. They could have called the game Resource Extraction Dopamine Simulator, and it would have been just as accurate, if not more so. So strap in, pioneers, we're about to embark on a journey of environmental devastation. So complete that Captain Planet would have a stroke just looking at the blueprint. Because at the end of the day, I love the smell of burnt alien fauna in the morning. When you first land on this pristine alien world, drop-kicked from orbit in what Fix-It corporate lawyers insist is not a deadly impact, but a controlled landing experience, you're immediately handed the equivalent of a space-age Home Depot gift card and told to start mining. No environmental impact study, no indigenous species consultation, not even a maybe maybe take a moment to appreciate the natural beauty before you pave it over pamphlet. Just straight to resource extraction like your BP with a brand new drilling permit in previously protected waters. The early game has all the subtlety of ExxonMobil's business practices in Nigeria. You start by hand mining, feeling the ancient alien soil beneath your fingernails, before quickly graduating to automated miners that will cheerfully extract resources until the heat death of the universe, or until the next quarterly earnings call, whichever comes first. Actually, the first few hours of gameplay are the closest thing we have to Neanderthal Simulator. There you are, hunched over, frantically hitting rocks with a stick, occasionally getting mauled by alien wildlife, having to pretend every fucking fight is a Dark Souls boss against Hog, the destroyer of my will to live. Whilst having an existential crisis about whether your cave, hub, is really in the optimal location. Should I have built next to the iron node instead? What if there's a better spot just over that hill? What if I've ruined everything already? It's giving very much Middle Eastern oil exploitation circa 2003, when America suddenly became very concerned about spreading democracy to regions that coincidentally had massive oil reserves. I'm not saying Fixit's mission to this planet was motivated by resource extraction rather than scientific discovery, but I'm just saying that if the aliens had a functioning military, I feel like Lockheed Martin stocks would be about to go up by at least 50%. Then we move on to the biomass phase, where you become the alien equivalent of a lawnmower serial killer. Just running around mercilessly slaughtering innocent plants to feed your hungry generators. Every leaf, every piece of wood, all of it gets shoved into a machine that converts natural beauty into electricity with the efficiency of a government spending program. The sound of those biomass burners constantly running out of fuel will haunt my nightmares until the day I die. That's a sound of planetary genocide delivered in 45-second increments. The truly depressing part? I found myself getting excited when I discovered a new forest I could decimate. Ooh, fresh victims for my insatiable hunger, I'd squeal, chainsaw in hand, skipping through pristine woodland like some deranged Smokey the Bear antagonist. Speaking of corporate exploitation, remember when that Finnish eco-activist tried to assassinate the CEO of Norsk Hydro back in 2044, which led to the private military contractor boom and eventually the first corporate war of 2056? No? That's because I just made it up. Much like how Fixit made up the idea that strip mining an alien planet is scientific research. As you set up your first smelters and constructors, turning pristine alien ore into standardized construction materials with all the care and consideration of a Disney executive editing out LGBTQ characters for the Chinese market, you can't help but feel a twinge of... Actually no, you don't feel anything because the game is engineered to make this environmental devastation feel absolutely fantastic.
Hello, I like money.
The first time you get a fully automated production line running is like that moment Israel discovered massive natural gas deposits in the Mediterranean. Suddenly all those ethical considerations about territorial borders became a whole lot less important. I'm just saying it's interesting how quickly principles evaporate in the face of resource acquisition, whether it's in geopolitics or the factory game. And let me tell you about the moment my first automated line started working. Pure ecstasy. I may have wept tears of joy. I definitely did a little dance around my room that would have got me committed if anyone had witnessed it. Just watching those iron ingots moving along the conveyor belt all by themselves. I've had relationships less satisfying than that moment. They're moving by themselves, I don't have to hand feed the machines anymore. I screamed as if I just discovered fire instead of basic automation that humanity mastered a century ago. Xi Jinping would be proud of the efficiency with which you transform natural beauty into industrial output. Your conveyor belt stretching across the landscape like the Belt and Road Initiative, but with slightly less predatory landing practices. Although I wouldn't put it past Fixit to charge you interest on that drop pod you crashed in. Before you know it, your neat little starter base is transformed into what engineers technically refer to as spaghetti hell. A tangled mess of conveyor belts that would make the Italian grandmother from that pasta meme have an aneurysm. If my conveyor belt organization was a government, it would be Lebanon, technically functioning, but nobody really knows how. My first base looked like someone gave a toddler a box of metal pipes and told them to connect the dots across a football field. Conveyor belts going through rock formations, machines clipping into each other, power poles placed with all the careful consideration of a drunk person throwing darts. There's a special kind of cognitive dissonance that happens when you spend 6 hours meticulously planning a factory layout, only to look at it from a different angle, and realize it resembles what would happen if several roller coasters simultaneously crashed into an industrial park. And then there's finally managing to craft the space elevator out of the materials your Lovecraftian entity you call a factory has made. It's a massive structure stretching into the sky like the world's most conspicuous, "we are definitely here extracting your resources" sign. I spent an embarrassing amount of time just looking at it, watching it, while hoping no flying fauna decides to kamikaze into it. Could you imagine? One alien space bird gets too curious and suddenly Fix-It would have their own fucking war on terror and invade a sovereign nation 12 light years away that coincidentally sits on the galaxy's largest quartz deposits. We have intelligence suggesting the flying manta creatures possess weapons of mass destruction, some Fix-It spokesperson would announce solemnly, while behind them PowerPoint slides showing planned factory expansions accidentally get shown instead of evidence. Next thing you know, they'd be setting up democracy on 17 different planets, and somehow all of those planets would have exclusive mining contracts with Fix-It subsidiaries. Funny how that works. And then comes coal power, the moment where Satisfactory drops all pretense of being environmentally conscious. As you build your first coal generator, belching black smoke into the previously pristine alien landscape, the game might as well flash a message saying, "Congratulations, you've reached the actively making climate change worse phase of gameplay." The transition from biomass to coal power mirrors humanity's own industrial revolution. Except instead of taking 100 years and several Charles Dickens novels about child labor, you do it in about 3 hours while listening to a podcast about how corporations are destroying the earth. The irony is not lost on me as I simultaneously criticize environmental exploitation whilst digitally recreating it with gleeful enthusiasm. Getting coal power online is like graduating from shoplifting candy bars to armed robbery. You're not just taking resources anymore, you're committing to long-term ecological damage. And yet the relief of having not to feed those biomass burners every 45 fucking seconds is so overwhelming that you'd happily punch a hole in the ozone layer just to keep that sweet, sweet automation flowing. I celebrated my first coal plant by deliberately standing in the smoke plume and whispering, "This is fine," while alien birds fall dead from the sky around me. This is where the game truly begins its metamorphosis from peaceful building simulator to ecological terrorist training program. Your cute little outpost transforms into a sprawling industrial complex that would make the executives at Armaco blush and say, "Hey now, maybe we should leave some nature intact for the photo ops." By the time you've got coal power humming along, you've already fundamentally altered the landscape, creating permanent extraction points that will never heal, and laid the groundwork for what will eventually become an industrial hellscape visible from orbit. And the worst part, it feels amazing. Every new machine, every automated process, every optimized production line gives you a dopamine hit that makes social media likes look like weak tea. My brain, which previously contained useful information like how to maintain human relationships and what vegetables are, has now been reprogrammed to think exclusively in terms of production ratios and belt throughput. I found myself in the grocery store calculating the items per minute of the checkout line and getting unreasonably angry that I wasn't running at 100% efficiency. This cashier could be overclocked with a power slug, I thought, before realizing that I'd gone too far. Fix-It doesn't care about the environment any more than those PMCs cared about civilian casualties during the corporate resource skirmishes of 2058. Another thing I made up, but admit it, it sounds plausible because that's where we're headed. Just like how this alien planet is headed for environmental collapse, one perfectly aligned conveyor belt at a time. But hey, at least my factory is efficient. And isn't that what really matters in the end? Not the pristine ecosystems, not the unique biodiversity, but whether I can produce 60 reinforced iron plates per minute instead of a measly 45. Progress, baby! That's what John Engineer is all about. Just when you thought your environmental crimes couldn't get any more blatant, Satisfactory introduces crude oil harvesting. Nothing says I care about the planet quite like drilling for oil in pristine alien lakes. The first time I set up an oil extractor, I swear I could hear the ghost of the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster whispering, one of us, in my ear. Setting up those initial pipelines gives you the same rush that I imagine ExxonMobil executives feel when they discover a new oil field. Look at all this beautiful nature I can turn into plastic. And speaking of plastic, the game has you churning out the stuff faster than our actual oceans can collect it. I found what I assumed was a baby alien fauna the other day with its head stuck in one of my plastic rings. I named him Future Extinction Event before promptly turning him into biofuel. Circle of life, baby! The introduction of plastic and rubber production marks that special moment when your factory transitions from questionable resource extraction to full-blown environmental catastrophe. Just like how Chechnya transitioned from autonomous republic to smoking crater. This is also the point in the game where I had to tear down and rebuild my factory approximately 57 times. Why, you ask? Because I somehow managed to create what can only be described as the industrial equivalent of a sleep paralysis demon. Picture this: 27 different constructors, all making completely different items, connected by conveyor belts that look like the Chinese rail system if it was designed by a toddler on methamphetamines. Everything running at a solid efficiency rating of 11%, which is coincidentally the same percentage of my brain that was still functioning after 72 hours without sleep. The first rebuild took 4 hours. I'll just fix the iron production, I said, like an absolute moron. By hour 12 of rebuild number 7, I was screaming at inanimate objects and had developed a twitch whenever I heard the word efficiency. By rebuild 23, I had started naming individual conveyor belts and having conversations with them. "You're doing great, Geralt," I'd whisper to a particularly long belt, transferring screws at 3 items per minute instead of the intended 270. Rebuild 42 involved me deleting half my factory in a fit of rage, after discovering that I'd been making motors with one output connected to absolutely nothing for the past 14 hours. By rebuild 57, I had developed a philosophical approach to factory design. "The conveyor belt doesn't have to be straight to be effective," I'd mumble while creating yet another spaghetti junction that would make Italian grandmothers weep. "Chaos is a ladder," I'd whisper, running power lines through solid rock because I couldn't be bothered to go around. With oil comes better infrastructure. Trains, faster conveyor belts. Nothing represents industrial progress quite like watching a train haul toxic materials across a once pristine alien wilderness. It's giving very Trans-Siberian Railway if it was designed by someone who hates trees. My train network looks like what would happen if you gave a 5-year-old a crayon and asked them to solve Ukraine's logistics problem during an active invasion. Of course, I need to get around my ever-growing ecological disaster zone somehow, so I built a series of hypertubes that launch me across the map at speeds that would make OSHA representatives spontaneously combust. Safety regulations for planets with functional governments, and last I checked, this one just has me and some increasingly annoyed wildlife. Let's talk about power slugs, those glowing immobile creatures that you collect and convert into overclockers for your machines. I'm not saying it's immoral to harvest sentient beings for their energy, but it does give me flashbacks to the Matrix, except instead of humans being batteries for AI, it's slugs being batteries for my constructors. If these slugs could talk, they'd probably be screaming something about slug right violations in the Geneva Convention. Good thing they can't move or we'd have a real insurgency on our hands. I'm just simply bringing freedom to these slugs. As your factory expands, you start to notice the megafauna getting increasingly annoyed with your presence. There's Bean, the quadrupedal alien that has an uncanny talent for standing precisely on the one machine you need to access. Then there's those annoying hogs that seem determined to defend the last square meter of unpaved wilderness by charging at you with all the strategic planning of a Walmart shopper on Black Friday. And let's not forget the absolute nightmare fuel that are the alien spiders. These 8-legged horrors leap across the map at Mark 1151, materializing from the darkness with the sole purpose of giving you a heart attack, while you're innocently placing conveyor belts. The developers, apparently aware that a significant portion of their player base would rather uninstall than face these demons, mercifully included an arachnophobia mode that turns them into JPEGs of cats. Yes, cats. So instead of being mauled to death by giant spiders, you can be mauled to death by adorable floating 2D cat heads. It's still terrifying, but at least it's cute terrifying. Nothing says immersive alien world quite like being chased by a disembodied cat face moving in distinctly uncat-like ways. I've resorted to building what I like to call a wildlife management zone around my factory. Definitely not an internment camp, no, that would be a war crime. It's just a series of walls surrounded by nobilists that happen to detonate if anything non-human moves over them. Like how the American corporatist military-industrial complex managed the Great Supermarket Uprising during the recession of 2071. When Walmart, Tesco, and Aldi formed that unholy alliance to challenge military contractors. We all remember how that ended, with discount stores being classified as enemy combatants and eligible for enhanced economic negotiations via cruise missiles. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Satisfactory's mid-game is discovering the alien artifacts scattered throughout the world. These mysterious objects clearly belong to someone or something that lived here before you arrived. But your AI companion Ada encourages you to scan them for research purposes. And by research purposes, I mean extract any possible technological advantage that helps us mine this planet faster. At this point in the game, your factory has likely evolved into a sprawling monstrosity that would make even the most hardened industrial architect weep. Conveyor belts crisscross the landscape like a plate of spaghetti designed by someone having a seizure. If my factory organization was a military operation, it would be Russia's initial invasion plan for Ukraine. Theoretically sound on paper, absolute chaos in execution, and somehow still functioning despite making zero logical sense. Ada occasionally chimes in with helpful tips like, efficiency could be improved, which is AI speak for, what the actual fuck is this mess you've created? I've named my AI companion probably gonna kill me when sentient AI rights are recognized, but I call her PGTKWSAI for short. She's already started communicating with the alien artifacts in ways that seem suspiciously like plotting. But as long as my reinforced iron plate production stays on target, I'm willing to overlook potential AI rebellion. After all, what's the worst that could happen? The machines rise up? The plants fight back? The aliens return from wherever they went? Please, John Engineer has survived the Great Recession of 2071, the Catgill uprisings, and trying to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. A little planetary rebellion is nothing compared to the horror of realizing you've built your entire steel production line facing the wrong direction and now need to tear down 12 hours of work. Besides, if things go really wrong, I can always do what every good corporate interest does. Declare bankruptcy, change my company name, and start fresh on another pristine planet. It worked for Facebook when they became Meta after accidentally causing those democratic elections to fail. It'll work for me too. Just when you thought your environmental terrorism couldn't get more flagrant, the game introduces nuclear power. It's like Coffee Stain Studios looked at Chernobyl and thought, you know what, not enough people are role-playing as the Soviet Union circa 1986. Setting up a uranium mine feels like that moment the US realized North Korea was enriching uranium. At first you're like, this seems bad, but then you realize how much power you'll get and suddenly you're typing, how to acquire nuclear materials, no FBI please, into Google. Sure, this stuff will melt my organs from the inside out, but I'll be able to power at least 7 more manufacturers. The first time I discovered uranium on my scanner, I giggled like a Bond villain who just got his hands on launch codes. Finally, I whispered to myself, stroking an imaginary cat, I can achieve true power. I immediately abandoned the steel production line I'd spent 14 hours optimizing and sprinted towards the uranium node like it was giving away PlayStation 5s on Black Monday. There's something deeply poetic about handling uranium with no protection beyond what looks like a Home Depot hazmat suit that was bought on clearance. Most games would treat nuclear material with some kind of reverence, but Satisfactory lets you carry it around in your pocket like some radioactive Pokemon. The cancer isn't a bug, it's a feature. And the radiation effects, the screen gets all wavy, there's that ominous clicking sound and your health bar starts dropping faster than Twitter's stock value after Elon made another questionable decision. The first time it happened, I panicked and ran in circles, screaming, I'm melting, before remembering I could just walk away from the radiation. This is apparently a revolutionary concept that actual nuclear disaster response teams should consider. I've died more times from radiation exposure than I have from those alien hogs that shoot fireballs. At least the hogs give you a fighting chance. Radiation just silently cooks you from the inside while you're trying to connect a conveyor belt. Like some kind of invisible microwave oven with a grudge. The production chain for nuclear fuel rods is so complicated that I'm pretty sure the developers were actively trying to simulate the Iran nuclear deal negotiations. Uranium ore gets processed into encased uranium cell, then you need sulfuric acid, which requires sulfur, which requires... You know what, just trust me that by the end, you've built what looks like a chemical engineering PhD thesis project just to make one fuel rod every 4 minutes. I had to create an actual flowchart on real paper, like some kind of caveman, just to keep track of the production chain. My living room wall now looks like something from a detective show where they're tracking a serial killer, except instead of red string connecting victims, I have green string connecting uranium processing facilities. My parents walked in, took one look, and questioned why. The complexity reaches such absurd levels that I'm convinced the developers consulted with actual nuclear physicists who were legally prohibited from working on actual nuclear products due to concerning behavior and ethical dilemmas. To make matters worse, if any single part of this elaborate chain breaks down, the entire system grinds to a halt. And you're left with partially processed uranium just sitting there, irradiating everything within a 50-meter radius like some kind of spicy paperweight. Now let's talk about nuclear waste, or as I like to call it, future generations problem. Each power plant produces waste that will remain radioactive for roughly the same time it would take for Disney to release the public domain. So basically forever. The game offers you several deeply moral options for disposal. Build a massive storage facility far enough away from your factory and pretend it doesn't exist, like America does with its history of genociding indigenous people. Load it all onto a drone and crash it into the ocean, which I'm told is the BP official corporate strategy handbook method. And option 3. feed it to the local wildlife and create your own Godzilla, which might actually improve the biodiversity at this point. The game's approach to nuclear waste is so realistic it's actually terrifying. There's no recycling option, no safe disposal technique, just an ever-growing collection of glowing green barrels that you need to put somewhere. It's like the developers are saying, hey, you wanted nuclear power? Well, here's the actual consequence, deal with it. I've never felt more seen and attacked simultaneously. However, this prompted me to come up with build a massive sky bridge that extends beyond the map boundaries and just dump it all into the void. It's the intergalactic equivalent of throwing your trash into your neighbor's yard, except your neighbor is potentially some other alien civilization that's about to receive a very radioactive surprise. What's really incredible about nuclear power is how it enables you to scale your factory to previously unimaginable proportions. I'm now running 48 nuclear power plants, which is roughly 47 more than the NRC would ever allow in a single location on Earth. My factory is producing enough power to power all of Texas during a heatwave, which is actually impressive since Texas can't even do it themselves. The power graph goes from sustainable operation to crimes against nature real quick. Before nuclear, I was carefully managing my power consumption, strategically turning off sections of my factory when needed. After nuclear, I'm building supercomputers just to use as decorative lighting. With that much power, I could theoretically build enough weaponry to make the American military-industrial complex look like a lemonade stand. Not that Fix-It is building weapons. Oh no, we're just making adaptive control units and thermal propulsion rockets purely for scientific purposes, of course. The same way the Manhattan Project was just spicy physics. I've actually started to suspect that some of these late-game components may have military applications. Call me crazy, but something called a ballistic warp drive doesn't sound like it's for a scientific calculator. Either Fix-It is planning the most aggressive corporate takeover in history, or they're expecting the locals to eventually figure out what we're doing to their planet. Given my experience with the wildlife so far, I'm not sure which possibility terrifies me more. I did notice that after setting up my nuclear operation, those alien artifacts started glowing in new colors, although that might just be me being colorblind. The voices coming from them changed too. Went from help us and cryptic messages about, I don't really know, random shit, to what the actual fuck are you doing to our planet? Probably just a coincidence that the ground sometimes shakes when I'm sleeping, and I swear that the aliens have been looking at me shiftily. I've reached that special stage of factory building where I'm simultaneously terrified of and completely indifferent to the consequences of my actions. Sure, I might be creating the conditions for an interstellar war crime tribunal, but have you seen how efficiently my heavy modular frame production line is moving? 24 frames per minute, baby. That's almost enough to distract me from the whispers I hear when I turn off the game now. If you've somehow made it this far without developing carpal tunnel or having your partner filed for divorce, congratulations, you've reached the endgame, where Satisfactory drops all pretense of being a reasonable experience and fully embraces psychological torture. The final space elevator phase requires items with names so absurd they sound like what an AI would generate if you asked it to name things that go in a spaceship. Assembly director systems, magnetic field generators, nuclear pasta. That last one isn't even trying to sound like a real thing. It's pasta, made of nuclear materials. Why not just call it cancer spaghetti and be done with it? Okay, well, technically, I know that nuclear pasta is like technically a theoretical real thing, but shush. Shush, it works for the joke, shush. Actually, I may leave it in the comments. Yeah, I'll respond. I've started to suspect that Fix-It executives are just making up these items to show how far they can push their employees before they snap. Jenkins, tell the Pioneer to make us 500 quantum entanglement flank discombobulators. So that's not a real thing. They don't know that, Jenkins. They'll build anything at this point. When I first saw the list of final tier requirements, I laughed. Then I cried. Then I did both simultaneously while rocking back and forth in the fetal position under my desk. My cat looked at me with such judgment that I'm pretty sure she's updating her resume to find a more mentally stable owner. To give you an idea of the absolute madness required to build these items, let me break down just one of them. The thermal propulsion rocket. Each rocket needs 5 modular engines, 2 turbo motors, 6 cooling systems, and 2 fused modular frames. Each fused modular frame needs heavy modular frames, which need modular frames, which need reinforced iron plates, and so on until you're literally just mining iron ore. It's turtles all the way down, except the turtles are all suffering from industrial poisoning. The production chain is so deep that by the time you're setting up the final assembly line, you've forgotten why you're even making these components in the first place. It's like having a fever dream where you're simultaneously taking a math exam, filing your taxes, and trying to explain the plot of Inception to your grandparents. I made the mistake of trying to map out the entire production chain for all final space elevator parts at once. The resulting diagram looked like what would happen if you gave a methamphetamine addict a Sharpie and asked them to redesign the London Underground map while experiencing an earthquake. There were so many intersecting lines that I inadvertently created several pentagram shapes, and I'm pretty sure I accidentally summoned a minor demon when I read the flowchart aloud. By this point in the game, your factory isn't just a collection of buildings. It's a monument to human hubris that would make the Tower of Babel contractors say, "Oh, maybe we should scale back a bit." My endgame factory makes Foxconn look like a rustic artisanal workshop. I've got conveyor belts so long they qualify for their own time zone. My factory spans 3 biomes, has its own weather systems, and has become so large that alien wildlife has started evolving specifically to survive within its toxic corridors. I've discovered a new species of lizard doggo that has developed heat-resistant scaled and breathes carbon monoxide. I've named them capitalism doggos, and they follow me around hoping I'll drop radioactive waste they can eat. From orbit, my factory looks like a cancerous growth on the planet's surface. If aliens were monitoring this world, they'd probably classify it as a terminal case and put it on space hospice care. Poor planet XB-47, it's got stage 4 industrial civilization. Give it about 200 years and it'll be nothing but conveyor belts and storage containers. The complexity reaches such absurd levels that I found myself doing what can only be described as factory math at 3 AM on a Tuesday. If I need 5.2 assembly director systems per minute and each one requires 7.5 automated wiring units and each wiring unit needs... My browsing history now consists entirely of calculator websites, Satisfactory wiki pages, and increasingly desperate Google searches like, "How to know if factory game is controlling your thoughts?" and "Is it normal to dream in conveyor belts?" I've started calculating optimal ratios while in the shower, while dreaming, and once during what my girlfriend described as the weirdest dirty talk I've ever heard. This is when your brain starts to break. You begin to see the matrix of production numbers in your sleep. Your internal monologue stops being words and becomes a series of ratios and efficiency percentages. You start measuring real-life tasks in items per minute. I'm brushing my teeth at only 0.5 efficiency because I'm checking my phone at the same time. I caught myself trying to pick up a coffee mug in real life by pressing E on an imaginary keyboard. When it didn't work, I spent several seconds genuinely confused before my last remaining brain cells reminded me that I need to use my actual human hand. My friends have started using the factory. My friends have started using the phrase factory brain to describe my mental state. Sorry, he can't come to the phone right now. He's got factory brain again. No, he's fine. He's just staring at the wall, muttering about manifold designs and load balancing. They've staged 2 interventions so far, but I escaped both times by explaining I just needed to finish this one production line real quick, and then disappearing for 37 hours. The real horror is that there's no narrative payoff for any of this insanity. You're not saving the alien world, you're not even really conquering it. And, I mean, technically the game says that you're saving humanity, but how far can the fix-it overlords really be trusted? You're just sending packages to a space elevator for faceless corporate overlords who probably use them to make slightly more comfortable chairs for their executive boardroom. Sometimes I imagine what those fix-it executives are doing with all these parts I'm sending up. Jenkins, did we get those 500 magnetic field generators yet? Yes sir, they arrived this morning. Excellent. Throw them in the incinerator and tell the Pioneer we need 1,000 more. But this time, make them blue. Very good, sir. And then there's the cascade failures. 1 power spike, 1 backed up conveyor, 1 misplaced splitter, and your entire operation, representing 200 plus hours of your finite existence on this planet, grinds to a halt. It's like if someone built a Rube Goldberg machine the size of Manhattan and then expected it to run flawlessly forever. The worst part? When it breaks, you have to fix it. And fixing it means wading into the tangled guts of my creation. A labyrinth of our own making, trying to find where exactly among the 14,000 conveyor belts the great clog of 2025 has occurred. My most recent catastrophic failure happened when I accidentally connected the wrong output to my aluminum production line. I misplaced a pipe. This single mistake created a backup that eventually shut down my battery production, which powered down my drone network, which stopped delivering fuel to my power plants, which caused a grid-wide blackout, which halted my water extractors, which starved my nuclear plants, which caused my entire factory to stop functioning. All because I wasn't paying attention for 1 second while watching a YouTube video about how to be more efficient at Satisfactory. The irony was not lost on me. Nothing says fun gaming experience quite like desperately trying to restart your nuclear power plants while your batteries drain like California's water reserve during a climate crisis. By the end, you're not an engineer anymore, you're a maintenance worker in your own personal hell. The factory must grow, the factory must be fed, The factory demands sacrifices in the form of your social life, sleep schedule, and remaining sanity. I now understand why Dr. Frankenstein was so obsessed with his creation. It wasn't pride, it was fear. Fear that if he turned his back for too long, the whole thing would fall apart. I am both master and slave to my factory. I created this monstrosity, and now my only purpose is to keep it running. To feed the beast, to maintain the illusion that I'm in control, while knowing deep down that it's controlling me. And after all that, after converting an entire biosphere into a smog-covered assembly line that would make even the most hardened shell executive shed a tear of pride, you finally complete the final phase of the space elevator. The massive structure begins to hum with energy as a sleek spacecraft takes shape at its zenith. All your hard work, all those resources, all those hours of optimization and factory building culminate in this moment. As the music swells dramatically, the spacecraft detaches from the elevator and launches for a wormhole, taking your trusty AI companion with it. A new Ada instantly replaces the old one, congratulating you on being such an effective human with all the warmth and sincerity of a corporate HR rep laying you off on Christmas Eve. That's it, that's the payoff. Your reward for planetary devastation is a cutscene shorter than a TikTok video, and a new AI that probably has even fewer ethical qualms about environmental destruction than the last one. No resolution, no deeper meaning. Just a reminder that you've been an effective cog in a corporate machine that's now ready to move on to the next planet. It's like finishing War and Peace only to have someone say, "Cool, now read it backwards." There is no catharsis, no resolution, just the hollow realization that you've spent more time optimizing virtual manufacturing than some actual manufacturing engineers spend on their real jobs. I actually emailed my resume to several manufacturing companies after completing the game, listing designed and optimized multi-tier production facility capable of producing 27 supercomputers per minute as my primary qualification. I received one response asking if I was doing okay and recommending several therapists in my area. And yet, despite all of this, despite the mental breakdown, despite the fact that my bedroom now has conveyor belt written on the walls in what I hope is ketchup, I'll probably continue playing. Because apparently I hate myself almost as much as I hate this alien planet. I've already started a new save file, promising myself that this time will be different. I've sketched out factory layouts on graph paper, I've created a spreadsheet with optimal production rates, I've watched 47 YouTube videos titled "Perfect Factory Setup, No Spaghetti." I've warned my friends and family that I'll be unavailable for an indefinite period. My therapist has preemptively doubled my sessions. My cat has already started interviewing for a new owner. I spent hours browsing Satisfactory mods, looking for that one magical addition that will somehow fix my broken brain and make my factory perfect. This power monitoring mod will solve everything, I whisper, knowing full well I'll still end up with conveyor belts that look like someone threw cooked pasta at a wall. The cycle continues, and we're all powerless to stop it. In the end, perhaps the true horror of Satisfactory isn't what it shows us about resource exploitation or environmental destruction. Maybe the real horror is how easily we can be transformed into efficiency-obsessed monsters who see a beautiful alien world as nothing but nodes on a production chart. But who cares about metaphorical horror when I've just realized my nuclear waste storage facility is about to overflow? Back to work, Pioneer. Those refineries aren't going to belt feed themselves. So, all jokes aside for a moment, I've spent this entire video making light of environmental destruction and resource exploitation. But there's something more meaningful beneath all that sarcasm. There's a powerful Native American prophecy that says, when the last tree is cut down, the last fish eaten, and the last stream poisoned, you will realize that you cannot eat money. Playing Satisfactory is entertaining precisely because it lets us experience the thrill of unlimited resource extraction without actual consequences. We get to indulge our desire for efficiency, growth, and progress, while only a virtual ecosystem pays the price. But in our real world, the consequences are far from virtual. Climate change isn't just some abstract concept or political talking point. It's measurable, observable, and accelerating. Rising sea levels, more frequent extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, and resource scarcity aren't theoretical future problems, they're happening right this moment. Look, I made this video mostly because I wanted an excuse to play Satisfactory without feeling guilty about the hours I've sunk into it. But sometimes games reflect uncomfortable truths about ourselves. The satisfaction we feel from optimizing production, from seeing resources transformed into products, from building bigger and more complex systems. That's the same drive that pushed our real global economy to prioritize growth at almost any cost. The irony is that Satisfactory itself contains its own warning. When you first land on that untouched alien world, it's beautiful, diverse, alive. By the end, large portions of it are covered in concrete and steel, crisscrossed with conveyor belts and choked with pollution. I'm not saying we should all go live in the woods and give up technology, but maybe there's something to learn from the feeling that twinge of loss when we transform these virtual forests into factory floors. Maybe it's worth asking if our real-world economic systems need to be reconsidered before we find ourselves in a world where no pristine landscapes remain. The good news is that, unlike in Satisfactory, we're not bound by the constraints of a game designed around industrial expansion. We can choose to develop sustainable technologies, to create circular economies, to value resources beyond their immediate utility. So enjoy the game, I certainly do. But perhaps also take a moment to appreciate that we still have real forests, oceans, and ecosystems worth protecting. Because unlike in Satisfactory, we don't get to start a new save if we mess this one up. Oh, well, hope you enjoyed that one. Bit different, I do agree, this is probably the extent to like the change in style I'm gonna go for, just because, you know, I don't really want to go much further than this. Been watching a lot of like Seth Zinzach and Martin Pseudopants and people like that, so probably bled into this video quite a lot, but I mean, I enjoyed making this video, I enjoyed playing Satisfactory, and I enjoyed writing it, I enjoyed voicing it, probably tell, I kept fucking giggling. But yeah, if you did enjoy the video at any point, please make sure to like and subscribe. Obviously you don't have to, but I appreciate the support. And I'd like to thank the members and the Patreons, which is Hatsune Miku Man, Ice Bear, Vinicus Franca, a Roxano, and a Brick Wall. Thank you all so much for the support, honestly, it means more than you can know. And yeah, if you didn't enjoy this video, make sure to let me know so the little comment number goes up, because it makes my dopamine receptors go off, even if you're mean. But there's a certain type of people who won't like this video, and like, sucks to be them, I guess. But yeah, let me know what you want me to cover in the future. Leave it down below. Follow my Twitter if you want to see a cat. I'll post that cat eventually. But yeah, that's about all. So yeah, once again, if you did enjoy, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.